In the stillness of a quiet room where the air holds the faint scent of old paper and the faint hum of a distant street lamp, the word hangover glows softly, almost like a whisper from the past. It first appeared in print in 1901, replacing older, more mysterious terms like spleen or morning sickness. But what exactly does alcohol do to the body? How does it weave its way through the blood, leaving behind that familiar ache? As we move through this gentle journey, we'll follow the trail of ethanol, the rise of acetaldehyde, and the quiet work of enzymes that shape the way we feel after a drink. Let the questions settle, and the answers come softly. The light has softened now, hasn't it? A gentle settling, the way dust motes hang in a late afternoon beam, barely moving. If you trace the slant of the light across the room, it will fall upon the spine of a book, perhaps, or the curve of a chair. It's a stillness that invites a quiet turning inward, a slowing of the edges of things. And within that stillness, a word. Here, on the worn cloth of a dictionary cover, the word is highlighted in a faded yellow, hangover. The ink has bled a little with time, a soft halo around the letters, as if the word itself carries a weight, a resonance that has spread outwards over the years. It's a curious thing to have a single word dedicated to such a complex experience, a word that for many holds a small, private history, a catalogue of mornings best forgotten, or perhaps quietly acknowledged. The very shape of the word feels fitting, doesn't it? Hang suggests a lingering presence, a refusal to fully release. Over implies completion, a state that should have arrived but hasn't. It's a suspension, a being caught between one state and another, a subtle imbalance. And to think that this particular constellation of letters, this small arrangement of sound and form, has come to represent so much. The experience itself, of course, predates the word by centuries. The raising of glasses, the shared warmth of fermented fruit, the loosening of tongues, and the slow, inevitable descent. These are rhythms as old as civilization itself. But to name something is to begin to understand it, to pull it from the realm of pure sensation into the light of observation. And so, hangover entered the language, a placeholder for the constellation of unpleasantness that follows the consumption of alcohol. Wine, beer, liquor, it doesn't much matter. The substance is merely a vessel, a trigger for a cascade of events within the body. It is not a single thing, this experience. It arrives not as a unified state, but as a collection of signals, a chorus of disruptions. A headache often, a dull throb behind the eyes, as if the very structure of the skull has grown too small. Drowsiness, a heavy pull towards sleep, yet a sleep that offers little true restoration. Weakness, a hollowness in the limbs, a reluctance to move. And then the more subtle disturbances, the difficulty concentrating, the dry mouth, the dizziness that lingers at the edge of perception. There is a fatigue too, a bone-deep weariness that seems to defy rest, a muscle ache, a slow burning across the shoulders and back, and often a deep and unsettling gastrointestinal distress, nausea perhaps, or even the more insistent call of vomiting and diarrhea. The body, it seems, is attempting to expel something, to recalibrate, to restore a balance that has been lost. A lack of hunger, a light sensitivity that turns the world too bright, too sharp. And for some, a quiet depression, a shadow that clings to the edges of the mind. The precise mechanisms at play remain, even now, imperfectly understood. It's a surprisingly elusive phenomenon for something so common. There isn't a single neat pathway to blame, a single culprit to identify. Instead, it is a convergence of factors, a complex interplay of biochemical and physiological events. One key player is a molecule called acetaldehyde, a toxic intermediate produced during the breakdown of alcohol. It accumulates in the body, contributing to the nausea and the headache. But that is only part of the story. The immune system, too, is involved, roused from its quiet vigilance by the presence of alcohol. It triggers a cascade of inflammatory responses, contributing to the fatigue and the muscle ache. And then there is the disruption of glucose metabolism, the delicate balance of sugar in the blood, thrown into disarray by the processing of alcohol. The body struggles to maintain a stable energy supply, leading to weakness and irritability. Consider for a moment the subtle dance of prostaglandins, hormone-like substances involved in inflammation and pain regulation. Alcohol disrupts their synthesis, contributing to the headache and the sensitivity to light. And then there is the increased cardiac output, the heart working harder to circulate blood, and the vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels, both of which contribute to the dizziness and the fatigue. The body is in a state of heightened activity, yet paradoxically it feels depleted, exhausted. And of course there is the matter of dehydration. As alcohol is processed, it draws water from the body, leading to the dry mouth, the dizziness, and the headache. This is a factor that has been understood for a long time, a simple remedy often prescribed, slowly replenishing fluids, restoring the lost balance. But even this is not the whole picture. The metabolic acidosis, the imbalance of acids and bases in the blood, also plays a role, contributing to the fatigue and the nausea. It's a remarkable thing, really, how a single act, the raising of a glass, can set in motion such a complex cascade of events, and to think that for so long this experience was simply accepted, endured, a predictable consequence of pleasure. But the attempt to understand it, to name it, to unravel its mysteries, is a testament to our innate curiosity, our desire to make sense of the world around us and within us. The word itself, hangover, has a surprisingly recent history. It first appeared in print in 1901, a relatively late arrival in the lexicon of human experience. Before that, there were other terms, less precise, less evocative: spleen, headache, morning sickness. But none of them quite captured the specific constellation of symptoms that we now associate with the term. It's thought to originate from the Old English hang, meaning to depend or remain, and over, indicating excess, a lingering remainder, a state that persists beyond its welcome. The evolution of the word reflects perhaps a shift in our understanding of the experience itself. As we began to unravel the physiological mechanisms at play, to identify the specific biochemical pathways involved, we needed a more precise term, a word that could encompass the complexity of the phenomenon. It's a curious thing to think that the language itself evolves alongside our understanding of the world. And yet, even with all our scientific advancements, with all our sophisticated tools and techniques, there remains a certain mystery at the heart of the hangover. Why does it affect some people more severely than others? Why does the severity vary from one occasion to the next? Why does a simple act, the consumption of alcohol, trigger such a complex and unpredictable response? The answers, it seems, lie in the subtle variations in our individual biology, in the unique interplay of genetics, metabolism, and lifestyle. It is a reminder that each of us is a unique chemical landscape, responding to the world in our own individual way. And so the word hangover continues to evolve, to encompass not only the physiological symptoms, but also the individual experience, the subjective reality of mornings best forgotten, or perhaps quietly acknowledged. It's a word that holds a small, private history for many, a catalogue of lessons learned, and a gentle reminder of the delicate balance within us. It's a strange thing to consider the weight of a single word, to trace its evolution through time, to uncover the layers of meaning that have accumulated over the years. The word hangover, held in the fading light, seems to absorb the quietness of the room, to resonate with the stillness of the afternoon. It's a word that invites a quiet turning inward, a slowing of the edges of things, and a gentle acknowledgement of the complex and unpredictable nature of the human experience. And the body, it seems, is always speaking, always signaling, always attempting to restore a balance that has been lost, or perhaps simply disrupted. The intricate symphony of events that follow the raising of a glass, a story that is still unfolding, a mystery that continues to beckon. The light has settled now, hasn't it? A stillness deepening in the room, the kind that makes the glass of water on the bedside table seem less like an object and more like a held breath. You can almost feel the cool weight of it, even before you reach for it. Beside it, the shadow of a head rests on the pillow, a quiet echo of the morning's discomfort, a memory held close. It is a strange thing, isn't it, to trace a feeling back to its source, to follow the thread of a headache to the very beginning of the evening. We spoke last time of the word itself, hangover, and how it carries within it the sense of something lingering, unfinished, a completion that hasn't quite arrived. But the word is only a marker, a small private history. The experience it names has been with us for a very long time, woven into the rituals of gathering, of celebration, of simply being human. And at the heart of that experience, at the root of the discomfort, lies a series of events unfolding within the body, a quiet chemistry that we can begin to understand. The first step, perhaps the most immediate, is the simple matter of water, or rather, the lack of it. It begins with the arrival of ethanol, CH3CH2OH, as it's known to chemists, and its swift passage into the bloodstream. Ethanol, a small, unassuming molecule, moves with remarkable ease through the tissues, seeking equilibrium, spreading outward like a ripple in a pond. And as it travels, it exerts a subtle but persistent pull on the water within the body, drawing it away from its usual places, shifting the delicate balance that keeps everything running smoothly. This isn't a violent expulsion, not at first. It's a more insidious process, a gradual leaching of water from the cells, from the spaces between them, a slow surrender to the demands of equilibrium. It's a bit like the way a sponge absorbs water, drawing it inward until it's saturated, leaving the surrounding surfaces a little drier. The body, of course, attempts to compensate, signaling the kidneys to hold on to what remains, to conserve this precious resource. But ethanol has a powerful influence, and the kidneys, despite their best efforts, find themselves releasing more water than they would normally. This is immersion diuresis, the subtle trickery of the molecule, creating a need before the need is fully felt. Most people can tolerate a small shift, a 3 or 4% decrease in total body water, without much difficulty. The body is remarkably resilient, capable of adapting to a surprising range of conditions. But as the loss of water increases, the subtle disruptions begin to accumulate. At 5 or 8%, fatigue starts to creep in, a dullness around the edges of awareness, a slowing of thought. The muscles feel less responsive, the mind less sharp. It's a feeling of being slightly out of tune, of not quite being present. And beyond that, at 10% or more, the deterioration becomes more pronounced, a physical and mental weariness that is difficult to ignore. This isn't simply a matter of thirst, although that is certainly present. It's a disruption of the fundamental processes that keep the body functioning. Water is not merely a solvent, a carrier of nutrients. It's an active participant in countless chemical reactions, a structural component of cells, a regulator of temperature. When it's depleted, these reactions slow down, the structures weaken, and the regulation falters. The body, in its attempt to maintain balance, begins to prioritize, diverting resources to the most essential functions, leaving less energy for everything else. And this is where the headache begins, a quiet ache that builds slowly, radiating outward from the skull. It's not simply the result of dehydration, although that certainly plays a role. It's a consequence of the shifting balance of electrolytes, the delicate dance of sodium ions, potassium, chloride, all of which are affected by the loss of water. When the concentration of sodium ions becomes too high, hypernatremia, it disrupts the electrical signals in the brain, causing the blood vessels to constrict and the nerves to fire erratically. It's a subtle but persistent irritation, a signal that something is amiss. But the story doesn't end there. Ethanol, as it travels through the body, isn't simply being passively transported, it's undergoing a transformation, a series of chemical reactions that are both essential and problematic. The liver, an extraordinary organ, takes on the task of breaking down the ethanol, converting it into less harmful substances. The first step in this process involves an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, which removes 2 hydrogen atoms from the ethanol molecule, transforming it into acetaldehyde, CH3CHO. Acetaldehyde is a colorless liquid or gas boiling near room temperature. It's a far more toxic substance than ethanol, a potent irritant that disrupts countless cellular processes. It's the primary culprit behind many of the unpleasant symptoms of a hangover, the nausea, the vomiting, the racing heart. The body, recognizing the danger, attempts to break down the acetaldehyde as quickly as possible, converting it into acetic acid, a harmless substance found in vinegar. But this process isn't always efficient, and acetaldehyde can accumulate in the bloodstream, wreaking havoc on the tissues. Think of it as a demolition process, a careful dismantling of a structure. The ethanol molecule is the original building, the liver is the demolition crew, and the acetaldehyde is the debris, the unstable fragments that must be carefully removed. The body works tirelessly to clear away the debris, but the process isn't always clean, and some fragments inevitably remain, causing irritation and disruption. And the disruption isn't limited to the liver. Acetaldehyde travels throughout the body, affecting the brain, the stomach, the intestines, the muscles. It interferes with the production of energy, disrupting the delicate balance of glucose metabolism. It triggers the release of inflammatory molecules, causing the immune system to become overactive. It disrupts sleep patterns, leaving you feeling restless and exhausted. This is where the complexity of the hangover truly reveals itself. It's not a single event, not a simple consequence of dehydration or acetaldehyde accumulation. It's a symphony of events, a cascade of disruptions that affect countless systems within the body. Each individual responds differently, depending on their genetic makeup, their overall health, their drinking habits, and a host of other factors. The body is not a simple machine responding predictably to every stimulus. It's a dynamic system, constantly adapting, constantly adjusting, constantly seeking balance. And the response to ethanol is no exception. The body, in its attempt to cope with the influx of a foreign substance, initiates a series of protective mechanisms, some of which are helpful and some of which are harmful. This is why the hangover is so unpredictable, so difficult to prevent. It's not simply a matter of drinking more water or taking a pain reliever. It's a complex and multifaceted response that requires a holistic approach, a deep understanding of the underlying mechanisms. And even then, there are no guarantees. The body, in its infinite wisdom, will always find a way to restore balance, even if it means enduring a period of discomfort. The glass of water beside the pillow, then, is not merely a remedy for dehydration. It's a symbol of the body's attempt to restore equilibrium, to rehydrate, to rebuild, to heal. It's a small gesture of support, a quiet acknowledgement of the effort underway. And as you reach for it, you can almost feel the cool weight of it, the subtle promise of relief, the slow return to a more balanced state. The body, after all, is remarkably resilient. It has endured much worse, and it will endure this too. The chemistry unfolds, and with it, the slow, quiet process of recovery begins. The shift isn't immediate, but it's happening molecule by molecule, a restoration of the internal landscape. The light has softened further, hasn't it? A quietness settles now, not the absence of sound, but a different quality to it, a slowing, a deepening. It's easy to feel, in a room like this, that the air itself is holding still, waiting. And perhaps it is, waiting for the full measure of things to unfold. We spoke last time of the initial shift, the body answering to the presence of ethanol, the subtle calculus of water drawn inward, the first notes of a response that would ripple through the systems within. But that first ripple, that initial cascade, is only the opening of a far more intricate story. A story not of simple cause and effect, but of variation, of individual resonance, of the way the same stimulus can bloom into vastly different experiences. Because the body, you see, is not a uniform vessel. It is instead a landscape of subtle differences, a chorus of voices, each with its own timbre and range. Imagine, if you will, a double helix, not as the stark black lines of a textbook, but as a strand of glass, catching the light, each curve a potential for variation. Along its length, labels drift, not names, not markers of identity, but indications of possibility. Each label represents a gene, a small instruction, a difference in the way the body reads the world. Some of these variations affect the speed at which ethanol is broken down, some the efficiency of its removal, and others the sensitivity of the nervous system to its presence. The enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase, the first responder in the dismantling of ethanol, isn't present in everyone in the same abundance. The amount you possess is, in part, determined by this helix, by the specific sequence of instructions you inherited. And that, of course, subtly alters the pace of the initial transformation. A faster breakdown doesn't necessarily mean a gentler consequence. It simply means the chemistry unfolds on a different timescale. But the story doesn't end there. The byproduct, acetaldehyde, that volatile liquid, that fleeting presence, also interacts with the landscape of individual difference. It binds to certain proteins with more or less affinity, depending on the shape of those proteins, a shape dictated again by the helix within. And the way acetaldehyde interacts with these proteins determines the extent of its disruptive effect. Acetaldehyde, as you recall, is a colorless liquid, boiling near room temperature. It occurs naturally in some foods, coffee, bread, even ripe fruit, but its presence in those contexts is fleeting, measured in parts per million. It's the sudden surge, the concentrated dose, that overwhelms the body's capacity to manage it. And even then, the management isn't uniform. The way the body clears acetaldehyde from the bloodstream is also subject to variation. Some people possess enzymes that break it down more efficiently, reducing its toxic effect. Others rely on different pathways that may be less effective or produce other equally unwelcome byproducts. And the efficiency of these pathways can be influenced by a host of factors: diet, sleep, even the presence of other substances in the bloodstream. It's a complex interplay, isn't it? A cascade of events, each subject to individual resonance, each altering the shape of the response. And that's why the simple picture, ethanol in, acetaldehyde out, hangover ensues, breaks down so quickly. It's not a linear equation, but a branching tree, each limb representing a different possibility, each leaf a unique experience. Consider for a moment the sheer scale of this variation. As of 2016, estimates suggest that approximately 283 million people worldwide live with alcohol use disorders. That's a vast number of individuals, each with their own unique landscape of genetic difference, each responding to the same stimulus in a subtly different way. Alcoholism itself is defined as continued drinking despite the problems it causes, a testament to the power of habit perhaps, but also to the fact that the experience of those problems is so profoundly individual. The label on the helix that governs your sensitivity to reward, for example, will influence your susceptibility to dependence. The label that governs your capacity to metabolize ethanol will influence the severity of your consequences. And the label that governs your ability to regulate your emotions will influence your capacity to cope with those consequences. It's not simply a matter of willpower then, or of moral failing. It's a matter of inherent difference, of the way the body is wired, of the specific sequence of instructions it inherited. And that difference extends beyond the genetic realm. The microbiome, the vast community of bacteria that resides within the gut, also plays a role. These bacteria influence the absorption of ethanol, the production of acetaldehyde, and the inflammatory response that contributes to the symptoms of a hangover. And the composition of your microbiome is in turn influenced by diet, lifestyle, and environment. So even two individuals with identical genetic profiles can experience vastly different hangovers simply because their gut bacteria are different. The landscape within is never static, never fixed. It's constantly shifting, responding to the ever-changing conditions of the external world. Ethanol, or ethyl alcohol, or grain alcohol, as it's sometimes called, the simple molecule with the formula CH3CH2OH, becomes, in this context, a catalyst, a trigger for a cascade of events that unfolds in a uniquely individual way. It doesn't simply cause a hangover, it reveals the underlying complexity of the body, the subtle differences that shape our experience. The research into this complexity is, of course, ongoing. It's a difficult task to disentangle the myriad factors that contribute to the experience of a hangover. Controlled experiments are challenging, to say the least. It's difficult to isolate the effects of ethanol from the effects of sleep deprivation, dehydration, and the psychological stress that often accompanies drinking. And the ethical considerations are significant. But the effort is worthwhile because understanding the complexity of consequences is not simply about alleviating discomfort. It's about understanding the body itself, about recognizing the inherent differences that shape our experience, about moving beyond the simple picture and embracing the subtle nuances of the landscape within. The helix continues to turn, doesn't it? Each label a potential for variation, each curve a testament to the individuality of the response. And the story unfolds not as a single narrative, but as a chorus of voices, each with its own timbre and range. It's a story that is, in essence, a reflection of ourselves, of the inherent complexity that makes us who we are. The body's attempt to find equilibrium, to restore the internal landscape, is a testament to its remarkable resilience, its constant effort to maintain balance in the face of disruption. And that effort, too, is subject to individual resonance, shaped by the helix within, by the specific sequence of instructions that guides its response. The subtle shifts in chemical reactions, the symphony of events unfolding at a cellular level, all contribute to the unique experience of recovery. And as the light dims further and the stillness deepens, it's worth remembering that the body is not a machine to be optimized, but a landscape to be understood, a landscape of subtle differences, of inherent variation, of constant adaptation. The experience of a hangover, then, is not a failure of the body, but a revelation of its complexity, a testament to its remarkable capacity to respond to the ever-changing conditions of the external world. It is a story written not in stark black lines, but in the shifting shades of glass, catching the light, each curve a potential for understanding. The next step is to measure that understanding, to quantify the individual variations and reveal the patterns within. And that, of course, requires a different kind of lens, a different kind of instrument. The light in the room has softened further, settling into the quiet hues of late evening. Dust motes drift slowly in the beams, each a tiny world illuminated for a fleeting moment before disappearing again. Here, on the laboratory bench, the glass of the test tubes feels cool to the touch. The labels, ethanol and acetaldehyde, stark and precise against the dimness. It is a stillness that invites observation, a space where the invisible currents of chemistry unfold at their own pace. You've come to a place of measurement, of attempting to quantify the felt experience of something as deeply personal and variable as the morning after. For it is, at its heart, a study in misery, a deliberate, methodical unraveling of what happens when the body, so elegantly balanced, is asked to process more than it comfortably can. And the first step in understanding any complex phenomenon is to find a way to speak its language, to translate the subjective weight of a headache, the churning of the stomach, the dull ache of fatigue, into numbers, into scales, into something that can be compared and analyzed. This is the work of the alcohol hangover severity scale, a tool born from the need to move beyond anecdote and toward a more rigorous understanding. It isn't a single grand instrument, but rather a collection of questions, a careful charting of symptoms across 9 categories: nausea, headache, fatigue, thirst, dizziness, stomach problems, sensitivity to light and sound, hand tremor, and cognitive impairment. Each symptom is rated on a scale of 0 to 3, 0 meaning the absence of the effect, 3 representing severe. The scores are then added together, yielding a total severity score that allows for a comparison of hangovers, a way to say with some degree of precision that one morning after was demonstrably more difficult than another. Imagine the process, not as a clinical detachment, but as a slow, careful mapping of a landscape. A researcher, not as a distant observer, but as a patient cartographer, charting the contours of discomfort. The questions themselves are a gentle probing, a request for honesty and self-assessment. How severe is your headache? The answer isn't simply a number, but a distillation of feeling, the throbbing pressure behind the eyes, the sensitivity to movement, the way it colors every other sensation. and as the researcher records each response, a pattern begins to emerge, a unique signature of the hangover experience. The development of this scale, though seemingly straightforward, was a painstaking process. Early attempts at quantification proved inadequate, failing to capture the subtle variations in symptom presentation. The challenge wasn't simply to identify the symptoms, everyone knows what a headache feels like, but to find a way to measure their intensity in a way that was both reliable and reproducible. It required multiple iterations, careful statistical analysis, and a willingness to refine the questions until they accurately reflected the lived experience of a hangover. The work, of course, is not without its limitations. The scale relies on self-reporting, inherently subjective and prone to bias. What one person considers severe may be quite different for another, influenced by factors like pain tolerance, emotional state, and even cultural expectations. And yet, despite these limitations, the alcohol hangover severity scale remains a valuable tool, providing a common language for researchers and a foundation for more rigorous investigation. It is a starting point, a way to begin to unravel the complexities of this pervasive and often misunderstood phenomenon. And it was this need for rigor, for a shared language, that led to the formation of the Alcohol Hangover Research Group. It isn't a single location, a grand institute with gleaming laboratories, but rather a network of researchers scattered across different institutions, united by a common interest in understanding the science of the morning after. They share data, collaborate on studies, and strive to push the boundaries of our knowledge. Consider the work they do not as isolated experiments, but as threads in a larger tapestry. Each study, each measurement, each analysis contributes to a more complete picture of the hangover experience. They explore the role of genetics, the influence of the microbiome, the impact of sleep deprivation, all the factors that contribute to this complex and unpredictable response. But at the core of their investigations lies the molecule itself, ethanol. C2H5OH, as it is known to chemists, a simple, elegant structure, yet one with profound effects on the human body. Picture it not as an abstract formula, but as a tiny, restless particle moving through the bloodstream, interacting with every cell it encounters. The process begins with absorption, as ethanol is rapidly taken up from the stomach and small intestine into the circulation. It's a surprisingly efficient process, driven by the molecule's unique properties, its ability to dissolve both in water and in fat, allowing it to cross cell membranes with ease. As it travels through the body, it distributes itself to all tissues, reaching even the most remote corners of the system. And it is here, within the cells, that the real work begins. The body recognizes ethanol as a toxin and initiates a series of metabolic pathways to break it down and eliminate it. The primary pathway involves two enzymes, alcohol dehydrogenase and acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Alcohol dehydrogenase converts ethanol into acetaldehyde, a highly reactive and toxic compound. Acetaldehyde is then further broken down into acetate, a less harmful substance that can be used as an energy source. Imagine the process as a cascade of events, each step carefully controlled by the enzymes. Ethanol enters the cell, alcohol dehydrogenase latches on, and the molecule is transformed into acetaldehyde. This is the critical step, the one that generates the most damaging byproducts. Acetaldehyde being highly reactive, binds to proteins, disrupting their structure and function. This disruption is thought to be a major contributor to many of the symptoms of a hangover: the headache, the nausea, the fatigue. Now consider the test tube labeled acetaldehyde. Dun dun. It isn't simply a container of a chemical compound, but a window into a world of molecular interactions. The liquid within is constantly in motion, the molecules colliding with one another, forming and breaking bonds. And as the researcher observes, they are not simply measuring the concentration of acetaldehyde, but witnessing the very process that drives the hangover experience. The precise measurement of acetaldehyde levels is a complex undertaking. Traditional methods often rely on gas chromatography, a technique that separates different compounds based on their physical properties. A sample of blood or tissue is injected into the instrument, and the molecules are carried through a column by a stream of gas. As they emerge from the column, they are detected by a sensor, revealing their concentration. But this method, while reliable, is relatively slow and cumbersome. More recent techniques involve the use of electrochemical sensors, which detect acetaldehyde based on its ability to donate or accept electrons. These sensors are much faster and more sensitive, allowing for real-time monitoring of acetaldehyde levels in the body. Picture the sensor not as a simple device, but as a tiny, exquisitely tuned antenna detecting the faint electrical signals generated by the molecule. As acetaldehyde binds to the sensor, it triggers a change in the electrical current, which is then amplified and recorded. The resulting data provides a precise and detailed picture of acetaldehyde levels over time, revealing the dynamics of its metabolism. And as the Alcohol Hangover Research Group continues its work, they are not simply measuring the concentration of ethanol and acetaldehyde, but unraveling the complex interplay of factors that contribute to the hangover experience. They are exploring the role of individual differences in enzyme activity, the influence of the microbiome, the impact of sleep deprivation, all the subtle variations that shape our response to alcohol. The understanding of these processes is not merely academic, it has practical implications for preventing and treating hangovers. By identifying the key factors that contribute to this complex response, researchers hope to develop targeted interventions, strategies that can mitigate the damaging effects of alcohol and restore the body to balance. What this means, then, is that the misery of the morning after is not simply an inevitable consequence of celebration, but a complex and measurable phenomenon governed by the laws of chemistry and biology. It is a landscape of molecular interactions, a cascade of events, a unique signature of individual variation. And as we continue to explore this landscape, we move closer to understanding the science of the hangover and to finding ways to alleviate its suffering. The quiet work on the bench continues, each measurement a step toward a greater clarity, a more complete picture of the body's response, and a gentle lessening of the weight of the morning after. The light, even now, seems to hold a trace of that initial brightness, a warmth that isn't quite the sun, but a glow from within, from the organ itself really, a slow, deliberate pulse, visible through the tissues, like a clock keeping time in a hidden chamber. We spoke, in earlier turns, of the body's response, the cascade of events set in motion by the arrival of something new, something that demanded attention, something that shifted the balance. And now, as those currents begin to settle, as the immediate demands recede, we find ourselves in the aftermath, a period not of simple return, but of active, painstaking restoration. It is here, within the right upper quadrant of the abdomen, that the quiet work unfolds, a labour of detoxification and renewal that occupies the hours after the initial surge has passed. The liver, a remarkable structure, carries a name that speaks to its central role, derived from the ancient Greek hepat, a root that echoes through the language of medicine even now. Hepatology, the study of its function. Hepatitis, the inflammation that signals its distress. It is an accessory digestive organ, yes, but to call it merely an accessory feels like a profound understatement. It is rather a central regulator, a gatekeeper and a transformer, responsible for an astonishing array of biochemical processes that sustain life. Think of it not as a filter, passively straining impurities, but as a vast and intricate chemical plant, humming with activity, constantly synthesizing, converting, and storing the nutrients that fuel the organism. The story of its work begins, perhaps, with bile, a fluid produced within the liver's intricate network of cells, a substance that looks, in its raw form, like a viscous, emerald green oil. Bile doesn't digest directly, but it emulsifies fat, breaking it down into smaller droplets so that the enzymes of the intestine can reach it, a kind of preparation, a softening of the landscape for the work to come. And within bile, a surprising component, cholesterol, a molecule you may recognize from other contexts, a building block of cell walls and hormones. But here it flows along with the other compounds, a testament to the liver's role in managing the body's complex internal economy. The function extends far beyond digestion, of course. The liver synthesizes various proteins, essential for blood clotting, immune function, and the transport of vital nutrients. It is a carbohydrate metabolism center, storing glucose as glycogen when energy is plentiful, releasing it back into the bloodstream when it is needed, a delicate balancing act that maintains a constant internal environment. And it produces hormones, signaling molecules that regulate growth, metabolism, and reproduction. It is, in a very real sense, the architect of the internal landscape, constantly adjusting and responding to the changing needs of the organism. But perhaps its most essential role, the one most relevant to our current consideration, is detoxification. The liver doesn't merely filter toxins, it transforms them, rendering them harmless or preparing them for excretion. It breaks down red blood cells, recycling their components and removing waste products, and it is crucially the primary site for metabolizing ethanol, the alcohol that initiated this entire cascade. We spoke of alcohol dehydrogenase and acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, the enzymes that break down ethanol into acetaldehyde, a molecule far more toxic than the alcohol itself. That process, that initial step, is the first act of restoration, the first attempt to regain control. But acetaldehyde is not easily dismissed. It is a reactive compound, capable of binding to proteins and disrupting cellular function. The liver, in its tireless effort to neutralize it, converts it further, eventually into acetate, a relatively harmless substance that can be used as fuel. But this process isn't instantaneous. The rate at which the liver can metabolize ethanol and then acetaldehyde is finite, limited by the availability of enzymes, the overall health of the liver, and individual genetic variations. And it is here, in the imbalance between the rate of intake and the rate of metabolism, that the symptoms of a hangover begin to arise. Think of the liver now, not as a static organ, but as a dynamic system, responding to the influx of ethanol with a surge of activity, working to maintain homeostasis in the face of a sudden disruption. The clock within its tissues ticks steadily onward, measuring the passage of time, marking the progress of detoxification. And as the ethanol is metabolized, as the acetaldehyde is broken down, the liver begins to repair the damage, rebuilding cellular structures and restoring the delicate balance of internal chemistry. It is a process that requires energy, a considerable expenditure of resources. And it is here, perhaps, that the lingering fatigue of a hangover finds its root. The depletion of glycogen stores, the disruption of hormone balance, the overall strain on the liver's metabolic capacity. The body, in its effort to restore equilibrium, diverts resources away from other functions, leading to a temporary reduction in energy levels and a feeling of general malaise. The liver, it turns out, is not a monolithic entity, but a complex and highly organized structure composed of millions of individual cells, each performing specialized functions. These cells, called hepatocytes, are remarkably resilient, capable of regenerating even after significant damage, but they are not invulnerable. Chronic exposure to toxins, including ethanol, can lead to inflammation, scarring, and ultimately liver failure. This regeneration, this capacity for renewal, is one of the liver's most remarkable qualities. It is a testament to the body's inherent ability to heal, to adapt, to restore itself even in the face of adversity. But it is a process that takes time, a slow and deliberate rebuilding that requires patience and care. And it is here, as we watch the clock within the liver's tissues continue to tick, that we begin to understand the true complexity of the aftermath. It is not merely a matter of waiting for the ethanol to be metabolized, for the acetaldehyde to be broken down. It is a matter of supporting the liver in its tireless effort to restore equilibrium, to rebuild cellular structures, to regain control. It is a matter of allowing the body the time and resources it needs to heal, to adapt, to return to its natural state of balance. The process, as we've come to understand, is deeply individual. The rate of metabolism, the efficiency of detoxification, the capacity for regeneration, all vary from person to person, influenced by genetics, lifestyle, and overall health. What one person experiences as a mild inconvenience, another may experience as a debilitating ordeal. And it is here, in the recognition of this individual variation, that we begin to appreciate the true subtlety of the response. The liver, in its quiet labor, is not simply reacting to the presence of ethanol, it is responding to the unique constellation of factors that define each individual organism. It is adjusting to the specific demands of the situation, allocating resources accordingly, and rebuilding cellular structures in a way that is tailored to the individual's needs. And as we watch the clock within the tissues continue to tick, we can begin to appreciate the remarkable resilience of the body, its inherent ability to heal, to adapt, to restore itself even in the face of adversity. It is a process that requires time, patience, and care, but it is a process that ultimately leads to renewal, to a return to equilibrium, to a restoration of the internal landscape. The prefix hepat, echoing through the language of medicine, reminds us of this central role, this tireless effort to maintain homeostasis in the face of a constantly changing world. It is a story not of simple recovery, but of active restoration, of rebuilding and renewal, a testament to the body's inherent ability to heal. The glow within the tissues, that slow, deliberate pulse, continues to beat, marking the passage of time, a quiet rhythm of restoration. As the light softens further, as the shadows lengthen, allow yourself to feel the weight of that quiet labor, the slow, deliberate rebuilding that is unfolding within. There is no need to rush, no need to intervene. Simply allow the body to do what it is designed to do, to restore equilibrium, to regain control. The liver, in its tireless effort, is already at work, a silent architect of renewal. Feel the warmth within, the gentle pulse of restoration, a testament to the body's inherent ability to heal. And as the clock within the tissues continues to tick, let the rhythm of its beat lull you into a deeper state of calm, a quiet acceptance of the body's natural processes. The work is underway, the restoration is happening, and there is nothing left to solve tonight. The emerald green oil of bile, the complex network of cells, the tireless enzymes, they are all tending to the task, a silent symphony of renewal unfolding within the right upper quadrant of your abdomen. And as you settle into this quiet stillness, allow yourself to be held by the gentle rhythm of that restoration, a testament to the body's inherent wisdom, its unwavering capacity for healing. The glow within, that slow, deliberate pulse, continues to beat, a quiet promise of renewal, a silent affirmation of life. The word hangover still glows faintly in the dictionary, its edges soft and blurred. It first appeared in 1901, pushing aside old names like spleen or morning sickness. Acetaldehyde, that toxic ghost, lingers in the body, twisting the stomach and pounding the head. Ethanol steals water, leaving the brain dry and the limbs light. Some process it faster, others slower, thanks to that enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase. It's all chemistry, all inside, all quiet now. The body slows, the mind drifts, the dictionary's glow fades, the room grows still, the headache lingers, faint, the stomach turns, gently, the body rests, quietly.